Welcome back. In this video, we shall talk about functions in TypeScript. In TypeScript, you can create a function like so. You can say function, my function, and let's say a and b as our parameters, and we can just return a plus b. Same way we create functions in regular JavaScript. In TypeScript also, we can go further by specifying types for our function parameters like so. So I can come here and say the a parameter is a string type and the b parameter is a number type, just like that. So this means the value that will be passed to the a parameter has to be a string, and the value that will be passed to the b parameter has to be a number. Also, I can say a number. I can use the union feature on our parameters also. So I can say a can be a number or a string. Also, calling functions in TypeScript is the same way we call functions in regular JavaScript. So we can just say my function, and that's it. So let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of this also. Let's make this a number, and let's make this a number also. And let's get rid of this comment so our return statement can be active. Now let's call our function and pass in values. Let's say 45 and 45. And let's do that. So we can actually store this in a variable so that we can console.log that variable. Let's say value sum is equal to that. So we can come down here, console.log value sum. When we do that, and let's compile our TypeScript file. After that, let's run our JavaScript file. You see we have 90. Note that I am only allowed to pass in numbers since I have specified the type to be a number type here. Fine. This means I cannot pass in any other data type. One feature also in TypeScript functions is that you can set the return type of the whole function like so. I can come here and say I want this function to be returned as a number. Before we go to the next video, let's talk about optional parameters and default parameters in TypeScript. In TypeScript, every parameter is required by the function. You cannot call a function without values for the parameter you set. The only way we can call a function without passing a value for a parameter is to make it optional. And the way to make a parameter optional is by adding a question mark at the end of the parameter name like so. So I can come here, let's use the b there, and pass that in. So when I take this out and I save this, you see we have no error whatsoever anywhere. But if we never had this here and I did something like this, take that out without any value here, you see we have an error coming out. So the only way to get rid of this error or to bypass that error is to pass a question mark in front of the parameter name you want to make optional. And one thing to note is this: you should always set your optional parameter after the required parameter like so. So I can't come here and have a b my optional parameter. It's going to give me an error. So as you can see, b here is already giving me an error. And here's the message: a required parameter cannot follow an optional parameter. So this has to be here. As you can see now, we have no error whatsoever. And one good thing about TypeScript is I don't have to run this code to see my errors. As you can see, whenever there's an error, it calls the error immediately while I am still working on my code. And that's the good thing with TypeScript over JavaScript. In JavaScript, you have to run the file most times to see that you have an error or to know the type of error you have. So when I come here, I'll have a message that says an argument for b was not provided. Now this brings us to default parameters in TypeScript. If you watched our JavaScript tutorial, you will see how we set default parameters in ES6 and vanilla JavaScript. In TypeScript, we can set default parameters like so. I can come here and just set this to 56 and set this to 56. Let's get rid of that question mark there. Now, this means that I can actually take out the values here and I'll have no error whatsoever when calling the function. If I call this function now by compiling our file again and using the node command to run our file, you see we have 112, and that's because the function now uses the default value that is set to the parameters, which is 56 and 56. But if I pass in two values here and I save that and I compile the file again and run the node command again, you see we have 200. And that's because the default parameters are only used when nothing is passed in here. So if you pass in a value here, it's going to override the default parameters. But if no value is being set here, the default parameters are going to be used. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to share.